much time and dollars developing knowledge and skills to simply let it go every time someone relocates or, retires in what they're doing. The workforce is in a period of transition in what they're doing. And, that isn't going to go away anytime soon. Today's workplace is going through some drastic changes that make that subject of knowledge transfer even more important than ever. We begin with those baby boomers. And these are people that are born during the post-World War II baby boom, considered between the years of 1946 and 1964. We've always known that the retirement of these baby boomers was going to cause a drastic change in the workplace dynamics, as well as pose a threat to an already unsteady economy. Those worries and predictions are no longer looming. They're here. This immense increase in retirement eligible employees is causing organizations to take a step back and look at what they can do to maintain that very important knowledge base. Now, after the baby boomers, you've now got your Gen X group. This group is moving into leadership and upper management positions. They've been in the workforce for many years. They're moving into those upper level positions, and they are, or soon, these positions are going to be vacated by the baby boomers in doing this. And then after our Gen X, we've got Gen Y. Currently this group makes up 25% of the workforce, and by 2020 it's expected that they'll make up 40% of the workforce. Add to this the fact that employees are increasingly staying with organizations for shorter periods of time. And, they're taking career development opportunities when and where they become available, even if that means that's outside of their present organization. And, since the start of the global recovery from the 2008 recession, people have been able to afford to move around and pursue these opportunities as they want to. And then last, we now have Generation Z. This group currently only makes up about 10% of the workforce, but soon they're going to be moving up, and they also are starting at an organization and then staying there for shorter lengths of time. So we see that baby boomers have a wealth of knowledge, but it may soon walk out the door. Generation X needs this knowledge in order to be able to move forward and upward into those positions that the baby boomers are vacating. And then Gen Y and Z also drastically need that organizational knowledge. But how do you ensure that they get it in time? It's just not enough for the HR function alone to understand generational differences. Your employees from all generations have to be able to communicate with and learn from each other. One of the things that we talk about how learning works is the concept of the 70-20-10, and we've all heard about that. The fact that 10% of knowledge transfer comes from courses and reading. 20% of learning comes from actual knowledge transfer of individual to individual, and 70% comes from the on-the-job experience in what we're doing this. What we talk about is, mentoring really covers all of these areas. It's interesting, as we were doing, research on this many years ago, and you began to find that the research goes back quite a long way when you look at this concept. It seems to be coming up more and more often as we talk about it, but it goes all the way back to some original work from Lombardo and Essinger, and much of what many people are most familiar with comes from Charles Jennings and also from Eric Schmidt. So again, we're looking at all of this, and we're looking at the fact that, We're going to make sure this critical information doesn't get lost. Now, we're not saying that you should do away with your training courses or self-study. But, there really are some things that are best taught in the classroom. But again, look at what you can get from mentoring. The takeaway on this is the fact that if you just had knowledge transfer, that's 20% learning. But add to that practical application, which gives you 90% learning. A great way that this Gen X can obtain that on-the-job experience from the baby boomers, and Gen Y can get it from Gen X, and so on and so forth, is through this concept of mentoring. Mentoring is going to add up and give you that 90% that you're looking for. Now, when we talk about mentoring, we first begin with the individual with the knowledge or experience in a given area of expertise, that individuals that are willing and able to share that knowledge with another. That's what we talk about when we talk about a mentor. But talking about this concept of knowledge transfer, Amanda, can you take us through our polls, please?
I would be delighted to. So we're going to start out with our first poll. The question is, what is the main focus of mentoring in your organization? Is it onboarding, leadership development, skill development, building out your talent pipeline, or something else? We've got quite a lot of responses coming in. Keep that open for a few more seconds. Great. I'm going to close out that poll and share the results. Judy, it looks like about 15% are saying that onboarding is the main focus of mentoring at their organization. 41% is saying that it's leadership development. 26% is saying skill development. 11% building the talent pipeline, and 7% are saying that another focus is the main focus of their mentoring program at their organization. Can you speak to those results?
Absolutely, and that 41% for leadership development is probably one of the most common things that we see around mentoring programs, but I'm really glad to see that the skill development and the onboarding also is fairly strong in doing that. One of the things that we're going to be talking about as we go forward in our case study is really how important that leadership development is as you go forward. So, Amanda, can you take us through our next poll?
Certainly. So we have just one more poll to follow up on that. Does your organization view or position mentoring as an effective way to transfer knowledge? Yes, it does. No, it doesn't. Or you're not sure if it does or not. Just take a few seconds. We've got the majority coming in. Keep that open for about 5 more seconds. Great. Thank you for your responses on that. Go ahead and share those results. It looks like 44% of people say that yes, their organization does view or position mentoring as an effective way to transfer knowledge at their organization. 11% are saying that no, their organization doesn't, and another 44% are saying that they're not sure. How about those results, Judy?
Yes, and I'm really glad to hear that 44% said yes. You know, one of the things that we many times find when it comes to mentoring is the focus of your mentoring program may be, you know, the leadership, onboarding, skill building, or whatever, and actually what is happening in those programs is absolute knowledge sharing and this knowledge transfer that's going on. It happens in a mentoring partnership. It's that 20% of individuals working back and forth with each other. It's that ability for the mentor to share that knowledge with another in what they're doing. And in addition to that, it's that experience, because in mentoring partnerships, one of the greatest things is that the mentee gets to experience things. So one of the things we many times find is that you may have a focus that is a little different in what you're doing. You may not call it knowledge transfer, but what's really happening is that it is. So the reason we ask this question is we really want you to think about, in working with your organizations, how really great it is that you are doing knowledge transfer in what you're doing if you have a successful mentoring initiative going on. So again, congratulations to those of you, and for those of you that aren't sure, we are going to suggest that you really let your organization know that that's what mentoring really is doing, in that knowledge transfer. Okay, all right, let's move ahead, and what we want to talk about now are the 3 main benefits that you're getting from knowledge transfer that's coming from mentoring, and I think you'll begin to see what we're talking about here. First of all, and there was 26% of you that said you use it specifically around skills. And you know, it might not be a skill in thinking in terms of, you know, a skill somebody's using on the job, but it could also be a skill around leadership and visioning and so on. And so you're using it in maybe other ways other than just what you consider to be a skill in doing that. We find much of that comes in leadership development and leadership mentoring programs. But the very best thing about mentoring having to do with any of those skills and knowledge that the mentor and mentee are working on is it's not just learning that skill, but the mentor is able to work with the mentee and talk in terms of, this is how that's used in this organization. Because someone may have experience that they're bringing in from another organization, but that experience and that knowledge and that skill could look very different in the present organization and the present organization's culture. So it can be incredibly beneficial for a mentee not only to learn skills, knowledge areas, and so on, but exactly how they're implemented in the present organization's culture. And then the other thing that's great about mentoring partnerships and what individuals can learn is, again, it's that practical application. Now, a mentee normally is the individual that comes into that mentoring partnership, and you know, they could have certain knowledge, as we've mentioned before, but they want to learn, what's it look like when I put this knowledge or this skill into practical application. So, you know, that the mentoring is not just a warm, fuzzy, feel-good partnership. There's a lot of learning and practical application that's going on. And not only does it have practical application in what's happening, but it's specifically focused and targeted to what the mentee needs. So, you know, it absolutely is what we call just-in-time learning. And the main thing that happens is in mentoring partnerships, the mentor can help the mentee avoid some pitfalls that may become natural, whether it's in your onboarding program, your leadership development program, skills, or whatever it might be. Is the mentor, because they've been there, done that, can really help the mentee to avoid pitfalls in what they're doing. So at this point in time, what I'd like to be able to do is to take you through a very specific case study. Now, this case study was around an organization that was in pharmaceutical sales, and you know, the organization was really trying to identify how to speed up the time from the hiring date to that what we call up to speed date. People are ready to go. You know, normally this took about 14 months due to training and field time in what they were doing. The scenario was that the individual would spend a certain amount of time in a training class, and then they'd hit the field with a supervisor for several weeks. The process would repeat itself for several months and cover several different, training modules in what they were doing and how they were taking it forward. Now, here was the first problem that they found out. First of all, there was a very large geographic area for the individuals to cover and for those supervisors to cover. The supervisors were already stretched, and they covered a very large area, which made it difficult to get to everybody on time. Then, due to some turnover issues that were going on, the new hires were coming in quite frequently. So there were new hires coming in all the time. And, because there weren't enough supervisors, the supervisors were depending on the training classes to get the sales reps ready. And then, they found out this wasn't happening, but the training function was indicating to the supervisors that, they couldn't do everything. And the supervisors needed to supply the practical application. Now, this was causing a problem, and what we found was the solution was mentoring in doing this. Now, the very first thing that happened, and all of this problem began and culminated in very stressed sales representatives. They were feeling kind of, left out on their own. And what that also did is they felt like they were getting little to no support, which was really contributing to the high turnover problem that they had. So it was almost like, we've got a high turnover, and the way we're handling this is contributing to even more high turnover. So, there really was a problem in what was going on. Now, problem number two, they began to realize had to do with, other issues that were going on within the organization. Now, this was a very old and established organization. They'd seen a lot of changes in the industry, and they'd always been able to kind of keep up with those changes and many times previously be able to stay ahead of the competition. There was a wealth of historical knowledge and talent that existed in the organization for many, many decades. Many of the individuals, though, that were in those management levels were nearing that retirement, or they were, somewhere around 5 years within that retirement age. And individuals who, were at the supervisory level and would normally fill those positions were getting frustrated, and, they were ready to look elsewhere because they were not seeing any knowledge transfer in what they were going. And it was causing a lot of frustration for them. Then what was also happening is the sales reps who thought they would be going into some of those supervisory roles, they weren't getting what they needed to move into those supervisory roles. There was no knowledge transfer, and there was some high turnover that was beginning to happen there also. So there were some real definite succession issues. All of these were based on a lack of knowledge transfer from one level to another. So, taking these problems one at a time, the solution, number one, was to reduce the sales rep turnover. And what the organization did was to identify and train qualified mentors within specific geographic areas where a lot of new sales reps would probably be located. This allowed the new reps to have someone close at hand and that could go on sales calls, could provide them with support and illustrate that practical application of what the reps had learned in their classes. What happened, and the solution then, was the learning curve was accelerated. Reps were getting up to speed much faster as the mentors would specifically work with the reps and the mentees on specific items that were covered during, the previous training sessions. And what they were able to do is target that learning for what each individual needed. So it was a situation where in one mentor-mentee partnership, you might have an individual that was coming in and they had some previous experience. So, there were certain areas that they wanted to focus on and other areas they didn't need to. So again, the learning was very targeted to these individuals. But then you might have another new hire that was coming in that was brand new, didn't have a whole lot of experience in doing this, and that was a very different targeted learning for them. And so the mentors then were able to do this with them. This was the very best of that 70-20-10 combination, and turnover did decrease in what they were doing. So in the 10%, they were getting the actual training workshop, they were getting learning there. In the 20%, they were getting that practical application and knowledge from an individual and being able to avoid some of those pitfalls. And the 70, the knowledge transfer in what they were doing and taking it forward. It was great practical application in everything that they were doing. Okay, now let's begin to look at that second problem and what was going on. So what about those, those managers, those supervisors, those senior salespeople? Well, they began to find out that the same solution, mentoring, was going to be the answer for this problem also. What began to happen was, again, the organization identified and trained mentors that were able to provide the needed skills and knowledge and cultural application of that knowledge for the individuals that would be moving into management areas. The same thing took place for the senior salespeople that were going to be moving into the supervisory roles, and it began to really bring about a very clear succession way of knowledge transfer. But here was another thing that took place, especially with these senior sales reps. They'd been in sales for many years, and so they had the sales skills, they understood everything in the sales role, but they were not prepared to take on a role of managing other individuals in sales roles by being in that supervisory role. It was very, very different to do this. Many times what happens in organizations is when they would normally, move senior sales reps into supervisory, after they were moved into that role, then they would get some training on what to do and so on. But that's a really, really reactive way of doing it. Having this knowledge transfer from supervisors to senior sales reps and doing that ahead of time is a much more proactive way, so that when the senior sales reps stepped in to that supervisory role, they were much more ready. And again, learning curve was greatly reduced. But here was another benefit. Many times we assume we'd like to have that next role. We'd like to have that. And, what it did ahead of time was to give some of the senior sales reps a real clear picture of what that supervisory role look like, and exactly what they were going to be taking on based on that. Because once the senior sales reps began to look at, this is really what the supervisory role is, this is really what you're going to be doing and learning, they had a lot of people that self-assessed out. And what it also did was it gave the organization a chance to view individuals in specific situations and scenarios and determine if they would be, a good candidate to move from sales to supervision. Again, normally in many organizations, people are promoted and then everybody, including senior management, tries to figure out if it's going to be a good fit. Again, reactive, where what we're talking about from a knowledge transfer standpoint was very proactive in what you were doing. So these were the two issues: salespeople, getting them up to speed faster, and looking at this succession and people being ready to move from one level to the other in the organization. And this is how they solved it. So they went through this step-by-step process. First of all, what they did was identify the specific area of need. And they knew that that was in the sales function. They knew that it was new hires, and they knew that it was, again, senior sales supervisors and so on. Then what they did is they began to identify exactly what knowledge is needed by which people. Now, by being able to do this, as I mentioned before, there were some individuals that came into the new hire sales role and had some experience, and some of them didn't, and so the mentoring partnerships were very targeted as to what people needed. But when they looked at it from the succession standpoint, it was very clear what the senior salespeople needed to understand and learn about the supervisory role, and the supervisory role needed to understand for the senior management role in doing that. Then they identified, qualified, and trained subject matter experts as mentors. Now, one of the things that I want to talk about is very, very important to qualify, because not all subject matter experts could be good mentors. So that's why you want to make sure that you qualify the individuals that are going into that mentor role. And then make sure you provide training for them. One of the assumptions we many times hear from organizations is the assumption that everybody knows how to be a mentor and everybody knows how to be a mentee in doing this. So again, very, very important not to leave out the training. Don't make an assumption on this. Then they were able to go through, and again, to ensure that these partnerships were going to be very targeted, they were able to go through and assess the areas of knowledge needed by the mentee. Therefore, the mentor could make sure the partnership was very targeted. Then train the mentees in their responsibilities. So again, don't assume that everybody understands how to be a mentee. I know that one of the things that we talk about in the role of the mentee is that they need to drive the mentoring partnership. Well, that can look very different if you're a new hire, but they still need to understand that they have got to take responsibility. They can't just sit back and wait for the mentor to provide all of the everything that's needed, or if there's questions that, or concerns the mentee has, and if they're not really getting it, they've got to step up. They've got to be ready to do this in their knowledge transfer. And then what they did was they measured effectiveness in how they were going forward. So that's how this company solved both problem number 1 and problem number 2 as they went forward. So to kind of sum it all up, no matter what organization you're working with, no matter what specific area you're looking at, whether it's leadership, whether it is onboarding and new hires, whether it is skill development, what you need to do around knowledge transfer is first define what's the area that needs this help, and specifically to define what the skills and knowledge areas are that need to be involved. Then you need to identify those individuals that should be your mentor. And again, not only identify, but qualify them. And again, train them, both mentors and mentees, and then make sure that you can track and measure your results. One of the things we always talk about when we talk about mentoring is that we believe mentoring is a business strategy. This is not a warm, fuzzy, feel-good program. This is a business strategy, and you want to be able to make sure each time that you go through, after you've defined your needs, identified and qualified and trained your mentors and mentees, that you can measure your results as you go forward. So, what do you think? Do you think this is knowledge transfer is going to be a great tool for you to use in your mentoring partnerships? And the other thing that, we want to know is, you may be doing knowledge transfer now, but your organization doesn't realize it. with your mentoring program and doing that. But, you know, if you have any comments at all, we welcome you to send them to us at mentoringtalent.com or info@ensala.com. We are going to forward today's slides and the recording. If you join us on our LinkedIn piece and our talent piece on LinkedIn. And the other thing we want to make sure we invite you to is we are going to be at ATD. For those of you that will be attending ATD in May in Orlando, that we're going to be speaking there about a lot of these types of things. You know, mentoring for multi-generational communication, development, and succession as you're going through, and the knowledge transfer, how that really affects being able to do that. So at this point in time, what I'd like to do is, Amanda, can you take us through a couple of those questions?
Sure, Judy, I'd be really happy to do that. So we've got a couple of really good questions. The first one is, how do you incentivize the more experienced salespeople in a situation like this to mentor the junior salespeople, especially when the senior people are commission-based?
Great question. Great question. And part of that has to do with, wait a minute, you know, time is money. And in doing that when you're on commission base for that. So, you know, really good question. That's got to be by the organization, I will tell you that. But one of the things that the organization has got to determine is, you know, how much is this worth to them? So as an example, the type of situation that we were talking about, the organization already knew what it was costing them in turnover and how long it was taking to get people up to speed. So that's one of the things you've got to have your organization do. It's kind of part of that define piece in doing that. But then part of what we suggest is that basically these salespeople that are on commission only, where time is money, sales is money, is that you have got to incentivize them dollar-wise in some way, because commission is the way they make money. That's their bread and butter. And if you're asking them to take time out to do that, you're going to have to incentivize and you know, give them some money one way or the other. My suggestion is that you look at it in terms of how many hours per week or per month the individual may be involved in helping that junior sales person in doing that, and then based on that come up with some kind of an hourly rate. But again, when you're talking about commission salespeople, where again, you know, what you do is based on what you eat and are able to bring in, you've got to do that. You really do, after you define your needs.
Great, thanks for answering that, Judy. So we've got a couple more questions. How do you qualify a person to be a mentor?
We believe, as I'd mentioned in the earlier slide, that a mentor is an individual who's got knowledge or experience in a given area of expertise, who's willing and able to share that knowledge with another. And the two most important words in that definition are willing. They're going to make a commitment to spending the time and the, you know, committed to the development of that mentee. So, you know, you've got to find that out, because it's very, very important. Now, the able part means that they actually have the skills to be a mentor. One of the things that we also talked about is make sure you don't just assume that if somebody is a subject matter expert that they'll be a good mentor, because it takes very different skills to be good at doing something than it does to have the ability to you know, share that knowledge with another. So to qualify your mentors, we suggest you actually do two things. Number one, you need to have a role profile, just like a job description. I mean, you wouldn't ask anybody to take on a job in the organization or a role in the organization they weren't qualified for. So we believe you start with a role profile, a type of job description as to what it entails, so that if somebody wants to be a mentor, they know what they're signing up for. And in addition to that, you need to have some way to assess if they have the coaching skills, the relationship building skills, the communication skills, the interpersonal skills, the skills that are required to actually be a good mentor. So, and then don't forget to train them, because again, you wouldn't, you put anybody into a new role, you want to give them a job description, you want to make sure they understand what the role is about, you want to make sure they're qualified, and then you want to provide them with the training they need.
Great. We've also got several people asking about measurement and effectiveness. What are some of the measurement points to assess, both around the program and around the mentor and mentee themselves? And how would you measure that in a way that you could present it to, I guess, your superiors and your higher-ups to prove that this is a program worth having?
Right. This is, we've been doing these webinars for about 3 years now, and I can tell you that every single webinar this thing around measurement comes up because, people don't think a lot about measuring mentoring. But as I said, we believe mentoring is a business strategy. And so if you've got a business strategy in your organization, I guarantee you're going to want to measure it. And you need to position it to senior management as a business strategy. But how you're going to measure results partly depends on your goal is. In other words, what are the very specific business objectives that you are going to tie your mentoring initiative to? And I can give you some examples. Some organizations have tied it to exactly what we talked about. Being able to decrease that learning curve. You first have to understand, under normal circumstances, how long does it take to get somebody up to speed? And then looking at, based on, again, defining, identifying, and measuring that, how can we decrease that? In this particular situation, we decreased 14 to looking at about 10 to 11 months, depending on the individual. That's a big savings, and once you've got that identified, that's very important. In addition to that, we've got other organizations who are looking at, again, that 70-20-10 type of situation in which they want to be able to offer either more development or decrease their budget around training and development. And so what they're able to do is to provide development, targeted development, to individuals through mentoring partnerships where the individuals don't have to take time off the job. They don't have to go through and actually travel or whatever to get the development that they need. So those are probably two of the main areas. In fact, if you would like to contact us, we'd be glad to provide you with a link to a webinar we did on how mentoring can save you training dollars and hours in doing that. But those, decreased learning curve, looking at reducing a budget, I would say, even in leadership training, getting, people up to speed faster, that it doesn't have to be just new hires and onboarding in doing that. Now, one of the other questions was then the measurements for the mentors and mentees. Well, I would say, probably the best measurements have to do for the mentor is, did the mentee, did you need to put together a learning plan? Let me begin there and kind of back up. There needs to be some type of a learning plan, goals and objectives that are set for the mentee, and these are set between the mentee and the mentor. So one of the ways to do measurements for the mentor is, did the mentee meet their goals and objectives? Did they get accomplished what they set out to do? And that's important. Another way to measure mentor effectiveness is if they are chosen as a mentor over and over again, because people understand that they can get the development that they need through that mentor. And also, we believe from a measurement standpoint, you're looking at both qualitative and quantitative. Qualitative meaning, how do people feel about the partnerships in the program, and quantitative meaning that return on investment. So the looking at, did the mentee meet the goals and objectives, that's quantitative. Qualitative could be, looking at how many times the mentor is chosen, how many times they decide to be a mentor and are chosen, and then also looking at a survey of some type to find out feedback from the mentee as to exactly, their feedback about the mentor. Now, the simplest measurement for the mentee is pretty much the same. Did they meet their goals and objectives in what they were doing? These were things that the goals and objectives should be tied to whatever your mentoring focus is, which should be tied to your business objectives. So did they meet the goals and objectives? Also, I would say feedback from the mentee's manager. Did performance improve based on the learning that they got? Manager's feedback about what they felt about the mentoring program. And again, feedback from mentors or mentees about the program and the partnership overall. It really does depend on what your business objectives are. What I've given you here are probably 3 of the simplest ways in which to do that. And I think the last thing was, how do you present it to senior management? You position it from the very beginning that this is a business strategy. This is not a warm, fuzzy, feel-good program. It's a business strategy, and you do plan to measure it. Hopefully that answered the questions.
I think it did. Thank you so much for the detailed answer there, Judy. That was great. Being sensitive to the time, I know we started a couple minutes late. I think we're about out of time. Do you have any final thoughts before we wrap it all up?
Yes, if we didn't get to your question, or if you are looking for any more information, we do suggest, come to our website at insala.com, and you're going to find there's a lot of resources there. There are white papers, there's articles, a lot of information that is on our website. And again, if some of you are interested in specifically the differences around training and mentoring and how you can save money on doing that, we do have a previous webinar that we would like to have. And we really do want you to join our LinkedIn group to be with us on that. So I'd like to personally thank everybody, again, for those of you that have joined us previously. We hope to see you again, and the same for those of you that have joined us for the same time. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for attending today's webinar. If you'd like a copy of today's slideshow, as Judy mentioned, you can find a link to it on our Mentoring Thought Leaders Club group on LinkedIn later today. If you would like the recording of today's webinar, don't worry, it will be sent to all attendees via email. If you have any questions, comments, or feedback, please feel free to email us at info@insala.com. We very much value your feedback on our webinars. Thank you again so much for coming, and we hope you all have a great day.